Are there any more chairs in the back? Can you check to see if there are more chairs? Or just try to press them out? Just for the people. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I know we posted this short notice, but we got a good crowd tonight, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to try to keep this to 7 o'clock tonight, so we do have a lot of information to give you, and we are going to take some questions from the audience, so if we can get started. My name is Gabriel Gonzalez. I'm the city manager for the city of Harlingen. First, I would like to acknowledge our city commissioners that are in the audience. We have Commissioner Rene Perez, who's over there. We have. You can't hear us? Okay. We also have Commissioner Frank Morales. We have Commissioner Daniel Lopez. And we have Commissioner Ford Kinsley. Thank you all for being here today. Now I'd like to introduce Mayor Norma Sepulveda. It was her idea to have this event tonight, so I'd like to thank you, Mayor, for having this for our citizens. So, Mayor?
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah. All right. I'm not going to take a lot of time because I know that this is a very important session and you want to hear from the speakers. But as Gabe mentioned, I thought it would be important and crucial to have this session so that way we can arm you with the knowledge that you need to go out and protest those values. Because just like you, I'm a property owner too, and so the stress and the anxiety and the emotions that you had when you opened the mail, I share those as well as the commissioners, city staff, and city management. And so I thought it would be important to bring experts to speak to you, to provide that information, so that way we are better armed, and also collectively as a community that we are protesting in the right way, making sure that we're hitting the right points and making sure that we are also doing so timely. We are trying to, there was a lot of outreach from the community wanting information and to be able to see this from their homes, so we're doing our very best to make that happen. But as Gabe mentioned, this was something that we put together really quickly, so hopefully the recording is done and folks at home can see this from their computers or their tablets or their phones. And if not, I encourage each and every one of you, what you learned here today, share it with your friends, your family, and your neighbors. So thank you again so much for being here. There will be a time for Q&A at the end of the speakers, so I will ask you respectfully to wait and hold your questions until the end, so that way we can get through and provide you the information that you need. So again, thank you so much for being here, and now I will pass it on to Robert Rodriguez, who is our finance manager.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Robert Rodriguez. I'm the finance director for the city of Harlingen, and I kind of want to give you an overview of the property tax notices that you probably already received in the mail by now. So I want to turn first to the notice, which is an example of the notice. So these were mailed, if you notice the date on May 1st, 2023. So there is a timing that is required when you file a protest. So this is the front of the notice. So this is the front of the notice that it was mailed out on the 1st. And so it should have all of your property tax information in this box and the date of the notice here. And so it kind of explains to you how the properties have been appraised for the 2023 year as of January 1st. And on the second part of the notice, it will tell you your valuations and your assessed values and your market value. So when you read your notice, make sure that you pay attention to the top part. It says that it is market value. The top part of this notice is a market value, and the bottom part is the assessed property values that you're going to be taxed on. So if you look at it, make sure that you're looking at the right appraised value. So if you see on this sample, it went from $129,000 in the prior year, 2022, to $142,629 in the current year, 2023. So your values, they cannot increase more than 10% when it's a homestead value. So the max that it goes up should be 10%. Now, the market value is something different, so.
Can you give him the microphone, please?
Thanks.
What a good suggestion.
Okay, so hopefully y'all can hear me now. So the top part of this, like I said, is the market value, and the bottom part is the assessed property value. So this is what you get taxed on the assessed property value. So all of these are the taxing entities that will tax you for each tax year. So as you see on this example, if you have $129,662 valuation, the Harlingen School District will tax you on that, less any exemptions, and your base tax rate will be $1,036. The next entity is the South Texas ISD, which is $129,662 at 49 cents, so it'll be 63 cents. So in total, your tax bill will be $2,663, assuming your value at $129,662. So if your assessed value goes up 10%, your tax bill will go up by $312,000. So your taxing entities for this area are the Harlingen CISD, the South Texas ISD, the City of Harlingen, Cameron County, Drainage District Number 5, and Port of Harlingen Authority. So these are all the components of the tax bill. For an example, if you have a $100,000 valuation, your property tax bill could go from $1,948 to $2,189, and that's a $241 increase. Assuming a $200,000 valuation, your property tax bill could go from $4,360 to $4,842. So the biggest tool that you have to fight your tax bill or to challenge your tax bill is to protest your tax bill. And so on your notice, there should be instructions on how to protest your tax bill. So the deadline for filing is May 31st, and this should be on everybody's tax bill, is the deadline for filing is May 31st, 2023, and the location for the hearings are in San Benito at 2021 Amistad Drive in San Benito, and the hearings begin today, May 15, 2023. So protesting your assessed valuations, the chief appraiser must publicize annually by statute that you can protest your property values, and that is evaluated by the Appraisal Review Board. Cameron Appraisal District does have an Appraisal Review Board, and these are the members of the review board, so they do exist, and they do listen to protests. So how do you protest? You can file a written protest on a form, or you can follow this link at the ARB forms at the Cameron County Appraisal District. And I've also brought several forms in case anybody is interested in picking one up after the session. I can hand those out. So you must file your notice by May 15th or 30 days after the notice has been mailed. So in our case, and you can look on your notice, if they were mailed May 1st, then you have until May 31st to protest. So this is the notice of protest. So this is a form, and it's a simple form. It's got instructions, and then you fill out the bottom part with your information. This is section 1. Section 1 continues on top, and section 2 is your property description. Section 3 describes the reason for the protest. So there are several reasons of why you can protest your property. And sections 4 through 6 are any special panel requests. You complete and sign your name. Like I said, protesting your property values is the best tool to fight against your property taxes. That's pretty much presentation.
Robert,
Yes.
can you repeat, I know that Ms. Morales is here, where you couldn't hear when he said the 10%, right? If you can repeat that section where you were talking about, if you have a homestead that you can only, the appraisal will only go up by 10%.
Right, so on the appraised value, if you have a homestead, your property values are capped at an increase of 10%. So they shouldn't increase more than the 10% on a homestead. And those values are different than the market values. Those do increase at a higher value, but those are not the values that you're taxed at. You are taxed at the appraised value, and so those do not increase by more than 10%, or they should be capped at 10%.
So, let's keep the questions to the very end, but just for clarification, if you have an appraised value that is, you might have, the total market value may be higher than your appraised value if it's your homestead. But they're going to go by the
appraised.
appraised value.
Right.
So I got a lot of questions, a lot of emails and messages from concerned citizens that have homestead, and that value was so much higher, the market value, and so people were scared, thinking that's what they're gonna be taxed on. But if you have a homestead exemption, and everyone should if it's where you live, and if you don't, that's another issue that maybe we can address if we have time. However, just so that, for that clarification. So that is the presentation that we have.
I do want to clarify that. I think that sometimes the market value will be lower than your appraised value. So in those cases, I think they take the lower of the market value or the increase of 10%.
And we do have, and we're going to go through this quickly because we have Attorney Travis Benz here. We also have George McShann. You saw on the list that there are folks that sit on the board that's going to review these protests, and George has graced us with his presence, and so he's got a lot of knowledge to impart on all of you. So I know that you have a lot of questions, but let's keep those, just hold on to them, and I promise you we'll get to them. That was it, Robert?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, and now I think we are moving on to George McShann.
I don't know if it doesn't work.
Good afternoon. I'm George McShann, and I sit on the Appraisal Review Board. Let me bring some clarity to this best I can. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. The Appraisal Review Board does not work for the Cameron County Appraisal District. The Appraisal Review Board members consist of 10, 7 of whom are voting members, and 3 are auxiliary members, meaning that the 3 do not have a vote to ratify a decision made on a property owner's property. Okay? Now, we are citizens appointed by the state district judge. And our responsibility is to make sure that you get a fair hearing and that your property, the evidence that's presented by the protester, as they would be you, is presented to the ARB board, to the owner or the owner's representative. And Attorney Travis Benz, who we work together, he represents taxpayers and normally large agents. We have 15 minutes. When you come to a protest, well, first of all, you know you have to file a protest as mentioned earlier, but you will have 15 minutes, in which the process will last a total of 15 minutes. 5 minutes for the owner to give their evidence, 5 minutes by the appraisal district, that's the person who is defending what they appraised your property for. And then the review board has 5 minutes to ask questions and come to a conclusion. So it's a short process. We have to be succinct and clear so that we can make a decision that's fair. What you have to do is this. When you submit your protest, you will get 15 days notice, let's say June 1st. you're given notice that you need to appear on June 15th. So between June 1st and June 12th, you need to gather your evidence. Let's say, for an example, it's going to show that your property is in a condition that you think is not worthy of what it's appraised for. So you take your pictures, you upload it, submit it to the appraisal district at least 12 days prior to your protest, okay? We cannot use smartphones, we cannot accept that, but you have to make sure that you get your evidence showing that this is why my property is not valued appropriately to you. Your protest is based on market value, that is the sale of a property, which is the same as yours, or similar to yours, as far as age, as far as a lot of different things. The age, the square footage, the structure, is it in the same neighborhood? Making sure that it's equal. Also, that's an equal piece. It's market value, and it's called equity, or unequal compared to other properties. Now, what happens sometimes is that you may live in a neighborhood where someone has a home that's large and huge, and it's sold for $300,000 or $500,000. And your home is, it's half that amount. So when they do massive appraisals, oftentimes it's going to elevate the value, appraised value of your property. So we'll be looking closely at that. So you can do your homework there. If you go on the website, you can find the comparable properties that you have to make sure you're getting a fair assessment of your property, okay? But you have to do your homework. Don't come in with just not any evidence, because it's going to be difficult to justify a reason for sustaining the property as submitted to you or mailed to you, or we will reduce. We cannot raise it. We can reduce that amount if it's warranted. Look at your 2022 appraised values. And by the way, property in Cameron County increased by 35% on an average. That's residential, mostly residential, and also commercial, okay? So make sure that you do this. The last thing, let me say this. Those of you who are 65 and older, that means that your property, if you are 65 or older, you qualify to have your property frozen at 65. And some of you here hit that, of course. You hope you hit it a long time ago because your property wasn't worth as much then, okay? So the school taxes, of course, is a big piece. The city is the second largest piece. Those are the two big ones. And then you have some in Cameron County, you have Southeast IC, so on and so forth. The other thing you want to remember is this. At 65, you don't panic too much, because that's not going to affect the amount, not a great deal of amount of tax you're going to pay, because that was frozen to 65. You understand what I'm talking about? It's frozen to 65, so it's not going to go up. Though you have more equity in your home because it's worth more, okay? Make sure of that. The other thing I'll say last time, move on. On Friday, the appraisal district will be at the Wilson complex, the Cameron County Tax Assessor Office on Wilson Road. They'll be there from, I think, 9 o'clock to 4 o'clock. So you can go there on Friday, so you don't have to drive all the way to San Benito if you want to submit your protest in. They'll have people there who will give you informal hearing, and you can file your protest then if you want to. The other thing you want to remember is this. The Appraisal Review Board will recommend to the chief appraiser a certain value, okay? That value can be appealed to district court if you're not satisfied with that. The other thing you must remember too, when you go into the office and you meet an appraiser, say, well, look at we're going to give you an informal interview. Okay, your house is worth $100,000. They'll say, well, we're going to settle for $95,000. If you feel that that's fine, that's okay. But if you say, no, I want to go to the appraisal review board, which would be us, There are three panels that will be hearing you, 3 members on each panel. You come before the board, that would be people like myself, and we'll look at it. So you don't have to settle. You don't have to settle necessarily if you feel that your value of your appraised property is not what you expect it to be, okay? I'll be able to answer questions later, but this is a quick overview of what we have. Thank you.
George, if you can keep the mic, I'm going to ask you just a couple questions so we can elaborate a little bit on what you touched on, because it's all very important information. So if any of these folks here want to go Friday to Wilson Road, and they want to protest, and presumably they're going to get a piece of paper here from, the protest paper from Robert, and fill that out, and they are going to drive that out to Wilson Road with no evidence. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And when they get there, they're going to hand over their form and say, I would like to protest, and then at that point, they will tell them what?
It would tell you that, okay, you have it. Now, they would also say, would you like to meet with an appraisal for an informal interview? That is, you can settle this right now if you so desire, and that is informal. So you don't have to agree with what the appraisal tell you. You have to say that, I'll ask you this question: how much do you feel your property is worth? Based on 2022, looking at that evidence, because that's not going to change. If you feel that your property is worth whatever it is, if you don't agree, you continue with your protest, and then you will get a letter saying that you will come to the appraisal review board for a protest formal hearing with us, the appraisal review board, okay? So that's not the final decision when you have an informal interview with an appraiser, okay? But sometimes you're confused, you think, this is it, then this is all you're gonna offer me. You say, no, I think I wanna go further. I think I wanna go before that appraisal review board, which are citizens like yourself, and we simply look at the evidence and make a decision, okay? Does that help you?
And the informal interview will happen on Friday
It could happen on Friday.
or at another day?
Or when you come in also, let me say this, when you come in San Benito, people ask you, would you like to talk to an appraisal before you go into the, and meet with the panel, okay? You can if you like, and not say, no, I want to go straight to I want to get a hearing from the appraisal review board. You can do that, okay?
Perfect. So when they go on Friday, they can say, you know what, we don't want to have an informal interview, we don't want to speak with anyone, we just want to go in front of the review board. Is that correct? Okay, wonderful. You mentioned earlier that evidence, you can't use your smartphones or things like that. How should they prepare if they have documents and pictures that they want to submit? How should they submit that? In what form?
Well, you can upload it on a USB thumb drive if you like. If you need help, then you want to get someone to help you do that, particularly those of us who are not technology savvy. Get someone to do that for you so it gets uploaded, and what you submit, we'll be able to see that on the screen when you present it to the appraisal people. So you got to make sure it gets uploaded to that, okay? You can also have pictures as well, but I would suggest you upload it, upload it on technology so we can have it and see it, to be totally visible, okay?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, George. And again, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions, and you can direct them to George or to Travis or Robert, whomever. But thank you so much, George. We're going to move on now to Travis Spence, and Travis Spence is a local attorney. He has an office right here in the city of Harlingen, and he has been doing, helping folks appeal their appraisals for many years, of both commercial and residential, and he's got a ton of knowledge, and so I'm going to let him get right into it.
Good evening. Can you all hear me? Okay, so first off, thank you, Madam Mayor, for inviting me to this event and giving me the opportunity to inform y'all. As the Mayor said, I started representing property owners back in 2000, and I've represented property owners every season since 2000. Spent my first few years practicing in Houston, ran an office in Bexar County for another firm, and then 2003 I came home and started representing property owners here. Last season we filed somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2,500 protests for Cameron County. I'm a licensed real estate attorney, I'm a licensed real estate broker, and I've also passed the senior property tax consultant exam. So many people I've represented, not just in Cameron County, but all over the state of Texas. And I am receiving calls from property owners all over Cameron County and Hidalgo County and several other counties, but most of the calls I'm getting are here in Cameron County, and the residential increases that we're seeing are not exclusive to Harlingen. I was telling some people that I received a call from a gentleman who bought a house out on the bay in Port Isabel, and he bought it in 2020 for about $900,000, and the appraisal district increased it to $2 million this year. And his neighbors on either side this year purchased their homes for $1.1 million. So he flew all the way from Houston to meet the man who he wants to reduce his house by $900,000. So I've seen all kinds of challenges. I've represented everything from the outhouse to the penthouse. So before I go any further, let's be very clear about how this process works. The number one step is to file a protest. Would you mind bringing up the protest form, please? If you don't mind, I'm a lawyer and I'm gonna walk. That's fine. Would you mind going to the next screen, please?
Okay, so this is where I received the bulk of my questions, is three, the basis for protest. And this is something that the appraisal district made.
Can you all hear me? I don't really like walking.
All right, and I'll just keep track. The number one question I get is reasons for protest. And we see box number one is incorrect appraised market value. And while the speakers are very knowledgeable, they haven't really gone into questions y'all are typically going to have. So box number one, incorrect appraised market value, that has to do with sales. What are the sales like that are similar to your property? And let's just assume it's a home, and let's assume it's a home in a subdivision. So the question would be, what are the sales like in your subdivision? And box number one also encompasses the individual characteristics of your property. Some of the speakers have mentioned photographs. A common question I get is, I have a client with a rent home. The rent home was built in the 1970s. And the client tells me, I haven't updated the kitchen. I still have the nice avocado green flooring, the harvest gold wallpaper, and the nice pink tile, and all those things we see in 1970s kitchens and bathrooms. And my clients say, I haven't updated my bathroom. I haven't updated my kitchen. And over the years, if I sit down with an appraiser in an informal hearing, which is just a one-on-one conversation, and I say, my client has a 1970s home, and their response is going to be, there is no way that someone's held onto a home this long and hasn't updated their kitchen. There is no way that someone has held onto a house this long and hasn't updated their bathroom. So the simple response is, I tell my clients, take pictures, send me your pictures, show me a 1970s kitchen, show me a 1970s bathroom, because the appraisal district simply isn't going to believe you if you say, I haven't updated my bathroom, I haven't updated my kitchen. You need to show them. If you have settlement cracks, if you have cracks across the face of your bricks, you need to give them photographs. If you need to get estimates of a foundation repair, get the estimates. But you've got to give the appraisal district the reason to make the changes. And one of the most important things I have to point out to people is the burden of proof is on the appraisal district. It's not on the property owner. This is the Cameron Appraisal District. It is their burden of proof to prove the value. And they will come to the table with sales or what they believe are similar sales. It's going to be up to you to come up with photographs. It's going to be up to you to come up with comparable sales.
Now, while the burden of proof is on them, you need to come to the table, okay? And the two biggest things I can recommend when it comes to tax hearings is this: don't mention taxes. In 23 seasons of doing this, I have never, ever mentioned taxes. And the reason is, the appraisal district doesn't have anything to do with it, and neither does the appraisal review board. The appraisal district is responsible as of January 1st of every single year to determine the value. And if you're unsatisfied with what you're being offered in the informal hearing, then it goes before the appraisal review board. The district presents their evidence, a property owner or their representative presents their evidence, the burden of proof is on the appraisal district. If they don't carry the burden of proof, it's the appraisal review board's responsibility to evaluate that evidence and make a decision. There's one step Mr. Marchand left out was, if you're unhappy with the appraisal review board's decision, you can file a lawsuit. And generally, I have clients that are not willing to do that. And several years ago, the legislature came up with another alternative, and that's called binding arbitration. And the fee structure for binding arbitration depends on the value of your home. But it's far more cost effective than coming into my office and saying, Travis, I need you to file a lawsuit on my house. You can come to me and say, or file it yourselves and file for binding arbitration. So, rule number one, don't talk about taxes. They don't have anything to do with it. It will shut an appraisal district employee down if you start talking about taxes. They don't have anything to do with it. The appraisal review board, they don't set tax rates. All they do is make determinations about value. Don't ever talk about taxes. Step number two, be nice. Yelling at these people and telling them exactly how you feel and talking about the economy and talking about inflation, they don't have anything to do with those things. They're only here to talk about value. They're not here to talk about anything else. We were talking about box number one. Incorrect. Box number two has to do with unequal compared with other properties. I have a lot of clients who don't understand that box. And the simple example I give is this. This goes, believe it or not, all the way back to the Boston Tea Party. Fair and equal taxation. That's what it comes down to. It was incorporated into the United States Constitution, and then it was incorporated into the Texas Constitution. From the Texas Constitution, it became statutory with a specific section in the Texas Property Tax Code. So it has to do with fair and equal taxation, fair and equal valuation. What that means is similar property should be valued similar. I represent all the church's chickens in Cameron County, Hidalgo County, Wilson County, and Starr County. Every church's chickens I represent. So what we do is we look at all the different fast food restaurants in a given city, and we make a fair and equal valuation. And we need to make sure that our property, our church's chicken, is somewhere in the middle of all the other fast food restaurants in Laferia, Texas. That's what uniform and equal means. Now, the Cameron Appraisal District took it one step further, and now they give you the option to check both 1 and 2. The other recommendation I would make is box number 9. Everybody forgets about box number 9. Other. The other is the Sarah Palin United States Constitution. I have an ugly house next to me. I have a water tower behind me. Any argument you want to make. We always check box 1. We always check box 2. We always check box 9. Now we start getting into ag and open space, and that is far more complicated for an hour-long presentation. So, I'm not sure where I am. So, that is part of the appraisal process. It all starts with filing your protest. You gotta file your protest. And you gotta file it no later than May 31st. The form that they have for you is a recommended form, but the code actually says that you cannot be mandated to use a form. You can send in a simple letter identifying who you are, identifying who the property is, and your basis for dissatisfaction. I have clients that just write a simple letter. I can't recommend enough
to file their protest. People are upset, and it's understandable. This burden of proof is on the appraisal district, and by these increases, I would hope that they're up to the challenge. But these are protests that have to be filed. I can't stress this enough, especially in the valuations that I'm seeing. This is their burden of proof, and I'm ready to give them the opportunity to prove it. So, when you go to your informal hearing, I recommend you take your evidence with you. Sit down with the appraiser, don't yell at them, don't talk about property taxes, don't talk about any of those things. Just talk about what all's wrong with your house, your 1970s kitchen, your cracks on the wall. If you happen to get sales from somebody who can give you sales, or you know about sales, you need to talk about what's going on in the neighborhood. And if you have a value in mind, and if you're not satisfied with the value, it's nothing personal. You just simply say, no, I'm not willing to accept that value, and you go on to the appraisal review board. And something Mr. Marchand didn't mention, appraisal review board hearings are open to the public. I recommend you go in early, go before your hearing, and go watch what it's like. It's not meant to be a courtroom, it's not meant to be rules of evidence or procedure or anything like that. It's your opportunity to go in and watch, but you need to be prepared.
I told you it was gonna be good stuff, all good nuggets, and we appreciate all the speakers taking their time. If you will, Travis, will you provide your contact information for folks? I don't know if anybody wants to write it down, or...
I'm probably gonna have to answer first.
This one might.
Oh, is it working?
I think it might work.
Could you tell me what the Wilson Road
I'm just going to allow Travis to, if you want to contact him after the session, and he's going to be here to answer questions, but in case I forget, let's just go ahead and get that out of the way. If you can provide your address, maybe to your practice and the phone number.
The name of the firm is Bent's Property Tax Management. We're located on 1018 East Tyler, just one street over, and our office phone number is 440-8900. We'll be accepting protests on behalf of clients for probably another week, maybe week and a half, because my staff has to have enough time to process the applications. I'm agreeable to answering questions if there are any.
One other thing, if you will, you mentioned arbitration, maybe defining what that means for the folks.
I apologize. So after the appraisal review board hearing, and you got to file a protest, you have to go to the appraisal review board hearing. If you're unsatisfied with the results of what the appraisal review board determines, you can file within 60 days of the ruling binding arbitration. And the fee structure is dependent upon the value of your home or your property. And what essentially happens is you file an application for arbitration. You're expected to deposit a certain sum of money. The normal house, the deposit usually runs between $450 and $500. You deposit that money with your application at the appraisal district. They send it on to the state, and at that point, an arbitrator will be appointed. And you can choose to appear in person, you can choose to appear by telephone, or you can choose to appear simply in writing. And again, you present your evidence, the appraisal district presents their evidence, and the arbitrator makes a binding and final decision. If the arbitrator finds more in your favor because you give a proposed number, a proposed value, if he finds more in your favor, then you simply get your deposit back and the value is changed. If the arbitrator finds more in favor of the appraisal district, then you simply lose your deposit. I was an arbitrator. I traveled all over the state arbitrating residential cases, commercial cases. At one point, I was the only arbitrator in the state willing to do mineral cases. I'm prohibited from arbitrating cases now because the rules changed
since I represent property owners, I'm not allowed to arbitrate cases anymore. I also mediate cases when people file lawsuits against the appraisal district. I've mediated those cases and gotten those cases resolved as well. So arbitration is a very cost-effective approach. It's become far more popular in the last 5 or 6 years.
Thank you for that. Okay, we are going to start taking questions, and I'll just ask if you could form a line, take your time. Behind it, were you waiting to?
I'm waiting for
Yeah, so there's
questions,
this
yes.
right up here. There we go. If we can just, 1 second, let's get everybody, yeah. Let's be respectful of everyone's time, so we're gonna try to limit as much as we can to just one question. And then I'll ask you to have a seat. One question unless they're related, okay?
I think they're related. One is, if it's a homestead and it's only supposed to increase by no more than 10%, are they appraisals increased by 20%, which ours is? And my second part of the question is, if you're age 65 and over and have frozen it, why is the appraisal going up? Ours has gone up over 50% in 5 years.
Ma'am?
And we have put lots of work into the house to keep it from crumbling around us, including piers. We've had drywall work done 3 times. We have had our whole driveway replaced and redone. We have had to replace our fence, and those are maintenance. Now we've had to replace our roof. That's maintenance. That doesn't increase the property value.
So those are very important questions, and we're gonna try to get to it just as quickly as possible. So maybe George McShann can answer that question. I think the question was, if you have a homestead and it should not be increased more than 10%, then why is it that on her bill it reflects it's more than 10%, and if you are over 65 and should be frozen, that it is being appraised at a higher value? Can you take that question?
Yes. If you're 65 or older, your taxes that you pay at 65, I say the tax you pay, remains the same on the property. However, you get equity. Equity means that you have
I understand.
high value, and you probably want to have more value because your home is worth more now than it was 30 years ago or 20 years ago, okay? So in my case, I'm over 65, okay? So I'm not so much worried about my value going up, because when I look at the taxes, I'm paying taxes back, many years ago when I hit 65. So it really does not impact me, okay? However, if you're not 65, that gives you serious concern, like our mayor here, right? It's going to be what it is. In my case, it really does not impact me. But you do get equity in your home. Let's say you decide at some point you're going to liquidate and sell your home. That is going to help you with your what? Probably what you sell it for, okay? And the 10% rule, that's the most you can increase per year, but it's 10% this year. Then it goes 10%.
It's 20% on ours.
And it continues until it reaches the appraised value, okay? So, Travis, you might want to say something to add additional clarity to that.
Yes. So, the actual rule is it's 10% in a single year, 20% in a 2-year period.
Now, there is some confusion about the over 65 and what exactly it does. Once you file your over 65, it freezes your school tax rate.
there's different rates for different taxing entities. And once you fall over 65, the year that you turn 65, whatever the school tax rate is frozen. Your value could continue to rise and your taxes could continue to increase and your other rates could continue to increase, but your school tax rate is frozen the year you turn 65 and the year you tell them you turn 65. As far as your homestead increasing by 20% in a single year, do you know if it went up 10% last year?
I do not know that. I know it's gone up 50% in 5 years.
Sure, which would be average to a 10% per year.
Actually, it's over 50%, but yeah.
And are we sure we're talking about your homestead value and not your market value?
54% is what it says on mine. The
But-
difference between the 2018 appraised value and the 2023 appraised value is 54%, and that's 5 years.
Okay.
My question is on the form for the notice of protest. On section number 4, where it says additional facts and hearing type, how specific do you want, are we to be on the form since we're going to be presenting our evidence?
In 23 seasons, I've never filled that out.
I'm sorry?
In 23 seasons, I've never filled that out.
No?
All I'm saying is I've never filled it out.
Okay.
Do that, whatever you may. I've never
Let
filled it
me
out.
say this. The appraisal review board makes a decision based on the evidence. Is it market, unequal? So be sure you check number 1 and number 2 and other. This way you're fully covered. If you do not check, let's say, unequal, all right, you may be in a subdivision where someone has a huge house, right? And the value is high. So the appraisal district, what they look at is a mass appraisal, and you get sort of average then, and your property goes up extremely high. So you make sure you always check at least 2 of those. Market, number 1, and number 2, and then other. This way we can base our decision on all the evidence that you submit, rather than putting yourself in a situation so you didn't check equity, so we cannot address that, okay?
Thank you.
My question is, of the number of people that show up for an appeal, for a review, with everything filled out properly, what percentage of those folks get an actual reduction in their appraised value?
I don't know that. I really don't know. It's based on the evidence. I would say that. And also, by the way, you can sign an affidavit to have someone represent you. And some of us, when we're older, you might have a relative, someone who can really speak on your behalf as well. You don't have to do this just yourself if there's someone who can represent you. Let's say, for an example, you want to represent your parents because they're elderly. So have them, they can be your representative. But
He's mine.
yeah, so it could, yes, that's what Travis does, but sometimes you just have someone who's knowledgeable, understanding, and can communicate clearly to the board your evidence.
Okay, and one other question. In the recent past, I know in my neighborhood, houses were selling for $30,000 and $40,000 over what asking price. And I'm wondering how that is any sort of a driver to the appraised values today. Because that seemed to be something that wasn't like long-term, and I want to know if that was a driver for the increased.
That's a very complicated question. I would want to add one thing while I answer on that one question. She asked the question, what percentage of people successful? And in 23 seasons, I couldn't tell you what the success rate is for individuals that come before the appraisal review board. I can't even tell you what my success rate is. I've never bothered keeping up with it. I just know I just keep doing it. But this is one statistic that is standard across the state. Less than 10% of the population actually protests. Yeah. It's a very, very small percentage that actually protest. So your step is file a protest. It's a shockingly low number. It's not exclusive to Cameron County. It's an average across 254, 256 counties across Texas. That's the state average, less than 10%.
My question is for George. What is the last day that I can walk into the appraisal office to get an informal?
Informal, okay. We will start hearing protests on May 30th. This is when the Appraisal Review Board will have its first day of protest for 2023 appraisals, okay? So you can do that prior to that. Now, what happens though, when you come in, even during the time that you're scheduled to protest, you're scheduled to protest at 10 a.m. on June the 5th. Okay, what will happen is that, okay, would you like to talk to an appraiser before you go into the review board? What the appraiser will do is give you an informal, I guess you might say, response and say, well, you know, we can work this out. You don't have to go into before the board, and we can settle. And I'm just saying to you, they do that even after May 30th, okay?
I realize on the day that they give me the board appointment, I have 30 minutes before, it said. I read that. But I also read that if I want an informal, I have to go in by this Friday. Is that true, or I can go next week?
Oh,
or
you
the
can go
next
next week. No,
I
they'll
can
be,
go.
Yeah, they'll be doing informals all the way up until the 30th, because that's when there were so many people there today, my goodness. I mean, hadn't seen that many people there forever.
Okay, that's my question. I can go anytime
Yeah.
up till the end of May, and then after that, the date you give me.
Right.
Thank you.
And
Go ahead.
for the lady that wanted the address, it's 3302 Wilson Road, Harlingen, in Harlingen, if you want to go on Friday. 3302 Wilson Road, it's at the annex building.
Yes, okay. I'm not sure if you, your comment advised that we can bring evidence to an informal review?
Yes.
Yes, we can?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah,
To an
okay.
informal, do that as well.
All right.
But you have some idea as to how much you feel that your property is worth. I'll ask that question. You think your property is worth so much based on, well, whatever evidence you have?
Right.
You're the owner.
Yeah. Okay. And then, let's say I choose to go to the formal review. I wasn't sure how you mentioned this, but you said if we want to submit information or evidence, we should do this prior?
Prior to, yes.
Prior
You do
to.
it 3 days, at least 3 days
Right.
before your hearing. If you're scheduled on the 15th, have it in by the 12th, and I would say even get it sooner than that, and upload it electronically.
Okay. And this is through their website?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, flash drive was mentioned too. If I were to load it onto a flash drive, do I send that in or drop it off? I'm not,
I would send it in to them. But so sure, they have it, so we'll be able to upload it and see it on the screen.
okay, thank you.
Hello. My question has to do with the correlation between development and the market volatility. How do those factors impact our taxes, and how can we combat that, if any? Like, I'm in Brownsville. Elon is right down the street, literally from where I live. So, and there's a lot of development going on. So is it a lost cause for people that are in the development, like in an area where there's a lot going on development-wise?
I don't quite understand your question. Are you a developer?
No, I'm a homeowner, but I know that in the area that I'm in, the prices have gone up drastically because of, I guess, I blame it on the Elon effect.
I still think it's worth filing a protest. This is a burden of proof that is on the appraisal district. I don't know the individual characteristics of your home, but it's going to be up to the appraisal district to prove
That the homes that they believe that are comparable to your home are actually, in fact, comparable. You know, Mr. Marchand mentioned taking photographs. I mean, I can remember going to the informal, asking the appraisal district for their evidence because it's their burden of proof. They give me what they believe is comparable homes. I've gone out and photographed these homes, and compared to my homes, they're not comparable. And those are the kind of things that need to be given to the appraisal review board, because the appraisal district's gonna say, you know, they're gonna come out with this, like what they call it, a comp grid. It's you'll have the subject property and it'll sit on a grid, and these are our comparables, and these are the adjustments we make, and we think the value should be this. And I'll say, well, this is the appraisal district's idea of a comparable home. Let's get some up-close pictures of what this home looks like. And it may be in pristine condition, whereas you have cracks in your walls. Or your house may be backing a water tower and theirs is backing a park. Those aren't the things the appraisal district's gonna talk about. It's gonna be incumbent upon you to bring those things to the appraisal review board's attention. So when you go, the advantage of going to the informal is you can request the district's evidence in advance, and the evidence they give you, that's the evidence they're limited to. So I like to pin them down to their story. I don't want them changing their story. So the advantage of going to the informal is getting the evidence in advance.
Thank you.
It's going to seem like a very dumb question, but this is my first time doing this. My husband always did it. Under section 1, it has all these boxes you can check. Now, we already have the 65 and older, but there's also the spouse of a military service member or veteran. Do I check that? Because he was a veteran, and I'm a Gold Star mom. So I don't know how that comes into play with the property.
I would check it, and you may have the benefit of certain limitations as to increases or freezing of certain tax rates. I would.
So definitely check it.
If in fact it's accurate, I would check it, yes.
Okay. Do I have to provide proof of that, like?
If they requested, likely.
Okay, thank you.
You may have already answered with Michelle's question, but when we send in the evidence of comparable properties, is that today, like right now, if houses are for sale in my neighborhood, I'm looking at what they're for sale for in my neighborhood today?
Typically, the appraisal district will make the argument it would be first quarter of 2023, all of 2022, and last quarter of 2021, unless there's insufficient sales.
But we had that.
I'm just telling you the typical window they look at. We're naturally going to make arguments about it's a irregular sales cycle and those kinds of things, but the general answer to your question is last quarter of the current year, all of last year, and last quarter of the prior year is generally before getting into unique real estate cycles and things like that.
Thank you.
I think I have two questions. The first one, if you already filed your notice of protest and you guys recommended checking every available item there, can you file an amended complaint or protest, because now we just learned that there may be some others that applied that we didn't check initially?
I often, when clients come to me and they've already filed their protest and they ask me to take over, I file an amended notice of protest. I've never been told it's right, I've never been told it's wrong, and there's no statute that specifically addresses it, so I just keep doing it until someone makes me stop.
The second question I have is the 10% cap, is that just as to the homestead or to any property you might own?
Only the homestead.
Okay, thank you.
And it's very strict.
Thank you.
My question was similar to about the appraised value of your home. How about if your subdivision? I went into Realtor.com yesterday. They're not selling anything in my subdivision. I think the last time they sold something was probably a year ago. So how do you determine appraised value of other compatible homes?
I mean, what we do is, I mean, we'll simply, as a real estate broker, I'll pull the sales in a given subdivision, and if there are no sales in the subdivision, then I start moving my parameters out to the next closest subdivision, and we're obviously focusing on making sure that what we're comparing to are similar in size, similar in year built, similar in relatively recent sales date. I have had instances where there are just no sales to be found, and you really want to address that in the informal before you get to the formal. Because at that point, I'd really like to know what the district's evidence is.
And does it help if your subdivision became a flood zone?
I've made that argument before, but you'll need to have proof of it.
Oh, believe me, we've had proof. I have pictures of 3 hurricanes, so yeah.
I'm gonna guess it's Mariposa Ranch.
So, secluded acres.
I'm sorry?
Secluded acres, yeah.
Protest now.
Well, my question is, I've been hearing all this from people at work, but I never got a notice from the appraisal district of what my taxes are gonna be. So I went into Zillow, and holy hell, it's like, the appraisal there is like more than 18%. But, so my question is, where can I get a notice of this if I never got it in the mail?
Did you receive?
Nope.
You notice?
Nope.
Okay. So,
My mom received hers.
okay.
I saw hers, but I never got mine.
Call, notify the appraisal district requesting that you're a property owner, you have not received your appraisal for 2023. I will say another thing. If you have, for something, that could cause your appraisal to be late, and if it's late, the appraisal review board will determine for good cause. Now, good cause could be certainly death in the family, you are ill, something that is of a consequence that would not allow you to file your protest on time. The appraisal review board would make that decision, look at what we have here, so this is good cause, yes, you can come in and have a hearing before the appraisal review board, okay?
Good evening. I have questions about homestead. I know you all said earlier that there's a cap if it's your homestead, and it seems that there's no cap if it's not a homestead property. But it seems a little bit ridiculous because I have one like assessed value around 80,000, and all of a sudden it dropped almost double to 156,000. So there's absolutely no cap on how they can increase the property.
On a non-homestead,
Yeah.
there's no cap whatsoever.
Okay. And the next one is, on the property where I live in, I forgot to file the homestead, but we filed it like Friday. I don't know if it's gonna picture in with the current protest that I have. They're gonna put it as part of the protest, but I did put it on the uploaded document that I have that we did file it for homestead, and if it could be part of the hearing during the arbitration.
I don't, that's up to the appraisal district to determine if they're going to accept their homestead application or not. I'm not sure.
And how far does it for the homestead to
The
be
homestead
processed?
it will not be retroactive. It's from, if it qualifies based on the time, it could qualify, but if it does not, it will go into the next year.
But I wouldn't be able to claim
That
backwards.
could be the case.
Okay. And just, I know the Cameron Appraisal District uses a website for all their appraisals. Is this available for us to use it as part of our protest, or if somebody can give that website to us?
Yes, it is, and
I have it.
you have it, Travis, right?
www.cameroncat.org. It's very user-friendly, there's maps,
No, I'm talking about the latest sales. I know that, no,
it's not.
they don't use that.
No, you need to go to the appraisal district and request your evidence for your hearing.
Because I know the appraisers use a website that they can have the latest sales.
There's MLS.
Yeah.
Listing services.
It's not available for regular us?
No, I mean, I pay my fees and pass my exams to be a real estate broker, and pay my fees every year to get access. There's one for South Padre Island, and then there's one for the rest of Cameron County. Hidalgo County has, I think, one for McAllen and one for the rest of Hidalgo County as well.
That's, thanks.
Yeah, I think my question is fairly similar to that. The appraisal district has a lot of access to data, and they sift through it and choose what they decide to present as evidence to the review board. Is there a way that the rest of us can have access to that data so we can see the rest of the sales, the rest of the real comparables?
The way I couch my request is, I ask the evidence they considered in determining the value and the evidence they didn't consider. And if I didn't have MLS access, or access to commercial sales, I'd be asking for that. I mean, it's kind of the fox guarding the hen house, but, just simply request the evidence.
Right. Well, during the review board, it seems like they're intentionally vague as to where they get the information to us, and so it just makes it difficult to figure out where they're pulling this information. And then I hate to say cherry picking because they really hate it when I say that during the ARB, but it seems like they're presenting the highest comps that they can, and we would just like to see the rest of the evidence that we could use to defend ourselves.
Now, you have the right to the appraisal district's evidence.
Yes, sir.
Ask them for their evidence. And that's the evidence they're gonna present. They'll probably present up to 6 comparables, okay? And you'll know the address, the subdivision, where they
Square
are.
footage, everything, yes, sir.
But request to see what evidence they're presented so you can counter that with your evidence. Because what we will do is look at that evidence, and you as the homeowner, you need to counter that because you've done your research to say that based on these comparables, it's not comparable, okay? Then we can begin to make a decision that's fair to the property owner.
Thank you.
Okay?
George, and Travis, how soon can they get the evidence prior to the hearing, if at all?
Once they send you the notice, the 15 days. So when you first get it, I want to see the evidence that you have from my property. They'll start from day one, and you have to be persistent, saying, I need to see the evidence. And if for some reason you don't get the evidence, you let the appraisal review board, when doing the protest, I did not get the evidence, okay?
And I encourage you to request that evidence in writing. I mean, the way I do it
Yes.
is when I file my protest, the 2 things I add to my protest list, well, the things that I add is obviously my basis for protest, but I have a long list of accounts. I obviously identify my basis for protest. I make my demand for evidence when I'm filing my protest. And the other thing I do is I file an affidavit and represent in the letter if for any reason I don't make my appraisal review board hearing, that affidavit is in place. It'll guarantee that it's read into the record and my client will have the option to go on to litigation or arbitration. I have clients who file their own protests and for whatever reason they go on vacation in the summers, or their kid gets sick, or their mom gets sick, or the dog gets sick, or whatever, and they miss their appraisal review board hearing. That affidavit that you file with your protest guarantees that if for any reason you don't make your appraisal review board hearing, you'll always have the option to file a lawsuit or go into binding arbitration.
My question is, I live in condos that were built back in 1978. So how do I compare to each individual condo if we've done work on the outside, but yet it's not still to the level that you can say it's better? It's just to maintain the facade that they look better, but they're not really better. There's so many different gaps on the outside of the building that haven't been covered, or the apartment that I live in was owned by somebody else that didn't remodel I haven't been able to remodel because of the economy, of course. So so the proof that the question is, the proof that I need to show is the outside of the building plus my apartment, and then the comparison to what their appraisal thing is, what they're served?
Typically in condominium situations, very rarely, assuming all the condominiums are the same, same size, they all face whatever.
There's only 2 buildings that have 3 bedrooms and 2 bath, and I live in one of those.
Very rarely will the appraisal district vary the value in condos in the same building, so long as they're the same size and the same features. Obviously, if they're different sizes, they have different numbers of bathrooms or bedrooms and things like that, you'll see variation in values. With condominium arguments, we typically focus on the individual characteristics of the subject property. Is it an updated bathroom? Is it an updated kitchen? We'll take photographs on the outside, we'll take photographs on the inside. And one area that condominiums often miss in condominium arguments is if there are any special assessments. And I'm talking about like condos on the island.
The carports have been redone.
Okay.
Or the windows have been replaced.
Right. There may be an assessment. And the argument I make on assessments is I ask clients to bring me proof of the assessments. And if an assessment hasn't been done yet, if all the carports are going to be redone and the association is going to, tack on a $300 assessment to each owner, my argument is if that repair or that change is being made after January 1st, which is the assessment date, then that problem existed on January 1st. And if that problem existed on January 1st, then that repair needs to be backed out of the value.
It's kind of complicated now because they were doing one building at a time, redoing the windows, and there still need 2 more buildings need to be done, and they haven't been done.
Has the assessment already been put on?
It gets put on at the beginning of each year.
Oh.
So that's what I'm saying, it's so complicated. But thank you for the answers.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if it's too much to ask, but earlier y'all were describing or showing examples of how when the values change, I guess, with the taxing entities, like if you go up to 10%, whatnot, how it changes year over year, like the taxes were this one year, and it'll be this the next year. My question is what about the taxing entities and their rates? How often do those change, or how can we find out when they change?
So those rates change on an annual basis. So the appraisal district will send the city certified totals by the end of July. And so then we begin our calculation at the city or at any taxing entity, the calculation to determine our rate. So those are done on an annual basis.
So how do we as citizens find out what the new rates may be? So like I know the examples that y'all showed just show the changes in valuations, but ideally if the valuations go up and so do the tax rates, well, that's just much more than what we're paying.
So the city, once we receive the certified totals, we determine our calculation, and then we hold public hearings for the citizens to come to town hall and voice their opinions on the tax rate. So those are probably done like in September, at the end of August or September.
Right, and that's what I'm just trying to see, how that changes so that we as well can be informed, so that we can kind of come out with those calculations for ourselves when we see what the new rates are at. With our evaluations, we can kind of make them. Okay.
And so we do post in the newspaper when those public hearings will be held. So like towards the middle to the end of August, we will publicize it. So just keep an eye out in the newspaper of when that'll be held.
So how did you hear about this session?
Online through Facebook, so that's just.
So we now have a communications and media department, and these lovely ladies and gentlemen will also be sharing this information on the city Facebook page.
Okay.
So that way more people are aware and you can come and participate and listen
Great.
So if you heard about this session, you should hear about those as well.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Hi, I just want to have a clarification on the proof along with the pictures. Is it the comparables of the houses sold in my neighborhood or the market value? And if so, how do I go about getting that evidence so that I can take to the hearing?
Market value, market sales, okay? You look at sales in your neighborhood, in your subdivision. That's one thing you want to see. Is it comparable, right? So you want to be able to do your own research yourself. You get it off a website, or sometimes people just know the neighborhood and know that it is published what the sale of a property is. You can see that, right? So find out what those sales are, okay? Is it comparable to your property?
Okay, so just Google prices of houses sold in my neighborhood?
Yes, it show up.
All right, thank you.
Hold on 1 second. I asked you your question about other values in your neighborhood. I encourage you to go to the Appraisal District website and if you just put in the street name, what'll come up is all the values of all the houses on that street. And there's ways to jump to the other streets and things like that. You need to see what your neighbors, what their values are. You need to make sure that you're
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my question's as it relates to the valuation they're assigning to the property and then to the structures on the property. When you go into an appeal or you appeal that decision, will they change the valuation at that point? I'm appealing the value of the structure. It went up 500% in this tax year. The valuation of the structure. The property didn't increase hardly any, but it is a rental property. So it's like, if I appeal it, are they gonna turn around and say, well, it should have been on the property, not the house? Or do they stick to the?
I can address that. Sure. First and foremost, the case law is very clear. Whether the value is settled in the informal hearing or the board makes a determination, the only thing that is determined is the overall value. What the case law says is it is strictly up to the appraisal district to apportion the final determined value between improvements and land. So they make the change however they want. I discourage you to say, well, I'm only here to talk about the value of the improvements. That's another way, or I'm only here to talk about the value of the land. That is not the way the appraisal district does their job, and that is not the way the appraisal review board does their job. We only talk about overall value, and then the appraisal district, I've seen cases where I'm very successful and the appraisal district will drop the improvement value all the way down to $100 because they don't want to reduce their land value. They want to be uniform on their land values.
Okay, thank you.
The time is now 7 p.m. and we want to be respectful of everybody that is standing in line. So the last person in line will be right now, which is the green shoes. There we go. Lovely lady right there. That will be the last question. So if we can just be as quick as possible with the question, and then we'll ask the panel to respond. But I just want to let everyone know, I know we said we wouldn't go over 7, but we want to get the folks that have been waiting. Okay, so if you want to step up to the mic and ask your question.
Yes, real quickly. For example, last year for 2022, my home was appraised at $205,000, and then this year it went up to $298,000. So, and granted, they did some adjustments because of the Homestead Act, but my concern is for next year. I mean, if I don't fight it, is it going to be $350,000 next year? So what is it that I can do?
It's your homestead value. Your homestead didn't go up more than $225,000. Your homestead value didn't go up to that $300,000 figure. your taxable amount went up 10%. The one thing I will say is this: if you see a $300,000 market value and a $200,000 homestead value, it's pretty safe to assume that the appraisal district will continue to raise the homestead value until they reach that market value. I don't know if that answered your question.
Do protest.
Yes.
Do protest. So we can look at evidence.
Thank you.
My question was around the same line, but if I don't protest in this year, am I conceding for the next year that I'm not going to be able to protest anymore because the market value is just going to keep rising? Or is it safe to say, since I'm not reaching and it's not a problem right now because of the cap, do I still need to protest? That's my question.
I protest, I encourage property owners to protest every year, and when the appraisal district makes that argument to me, the response is always the same. Who said last year's value was right? That's my response when they make that argument. I never said last year's value was right, so let's talk about this year. I've gotten values below last year's value if I have the evidence to prove it.
Thank you.
Good evening, y'all. Thank you so much for the information. So I just wanted to understand the difference between the market value and the appraisal value, because this year the appraisal value seems to be getting closer to the market value, but how come the year before it wasn't close to what the market value was? So I'm trying to understand the calculation there from the county and where we could get more information as to how you get to that assessment.
Well, I'll just say that the panel here, just to reiterate, there is no one here that represents the appraisal district that does the work that you're asking.
Yes.
What we have here is Travis Benz. He helps folks like you, and George McShann is appointed to the board, but it has nothing to do with those values. So like you, we want the answer to those questions
I
too.
imagine,
But
yes.
I don't know that we here have that information. But that's the question on everyone's mind.
Yes.
That we, unfortunately, I wish I'd share it with you. I don't have that, and I don't think anyone else does.
Okay. No, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for coming.
Hi, I just have a question. My mother recently passed, and in order for us to protest her appraised value on her homes, is the executor able to do that on her behalf?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
I'd like to know how long this appraisal is good for. I helped 12 of my neighbors go through the process last year. All 12 of them were reduced, and this year they're being reappraised at higher than what the appraisal was last year that they fought. I want to know why, because it says in the tax code that you're supposed to be appraised, once every 3 years. Okay, why 2 years in a row? And why at such a big increase?
So I think I'm going to just, yes. I mean, that's a wonderful statement to make, and I applaud you for helping your fellow neighbors. And again, as in the other question, there's no one here that it really has that information, because we don't work for the appraisal district. That information is something that could be addressed and should be addressed. I would imagine each individual protester to say, hey, the code reflects this, you're doing this, can you give that explanation? However, given that you've got that 5 minutes that you probably already know about, I don't know that that'd be worth the time while you're in that hearing, but those are questions that could be addressed to the folks that are at the appraisal district.
It's being addressed. It's just slow because it
Absolutely.
has to go through the chief appraiser, then it has to go to the board if that answer is not accurate or reflective of what it should be or what the code says. So it just takes a while. It's just that oh, definitely. If you go and you do your appraisal in June, and then supposedly the appraisal is reappraised at the first of the year, that's not even a year. By the time you get it in May, yes, it's a year, but then you have 15 days to go through and redo it. Very, very frustrating. And I will mention that under the previous chief appraiser, he did allow, through his policy, that if there was an appraisal done and approved by the ARB, it was not up for reappraisal the following year. The current chief appraiser, Mr. Molina, to my understanding, took that away. And so now it can be every year, as long as they have determined and they say that they have the evidence in order to do it. But to me, it just sounds like cherry picking and a way to raise the property taxes. But thank you.
Thank you. So once again, I want to thank Travis Spence for taking the time out of his very, very busy schedule to be here today. I will tell you that Travis and my son played flag football together, and he's been working so hard that at the game he did not have a voice, and I was afraid that he might not be able to be here to speak to you. So he is working very hard, and we thank him for taking the time. Thank Robert Rodriguez, our finance director. George McShann for sharing the treasure. And of course, our media department for making this available to the folks at home. And of course, Gabriel Gonzalez, who we couldn't do anything without our city manager, so I want to thank him for putting this together. And thank all of you for taking time out of your day. We share your concerns. We want to help. We want to be a resource for you. I hope that all of you go out and protest and we collectively speak as one community and get things done. So thank you so much on our one